Documents viewed by BBC News have exposed the full scope of medical trials conducted on children in the 1970s and 1980s that used contaminated blood supplies. They disclose a hidden realm of risky clinical trials involving minors in the UK, where medical professionals prioritised research objectives over the requirements of their patients. They involved hundreds of people, went on for more than 15 years, and most of them contracted HIV and hepatitis C. One of the survivors told the BBC that he had guinea pig treatment. Children with blood clotting abnormalities participated in the trials, even though their families frequently did not give their permission. Most of the kids that signed up are no longer with us. Records also reveal that despite the general knowledge that blood products were prone to contamination, clinicians in haemophilia centers around the nation continued to utilize them. During the 1970s and 1980s, blood products were imported from the US due to a shortage in the UK. Plasma for the therapies was obtained from high-risk donors, such as drug users and inmates, who were contaminated with potentially lethal diseases including HIV and hepatitis C, which assaults the liver and causes cirrhosis and cancer. Although Factor VIII blood was shown to be quite successful in halting bleeding, it was also well recognized to be virus-contaminated. A public investigation into the matter is underway. May is when the final report is due. Luke O'Shea Phillips, a 42-year-old guinea pig, has mild haemophilia, a blood clotting condition that makes him more prone to bruising and bleeding than most people. When he was receiving treatment at the Middlesex Hospital in central London in 1985 for a minor cut to his lips at the age of 3, he contracted the potentially fatal viral virus hepatitis C. According to documents obtained by the BBC, he may have been purposefully given the blood product, which his physician was aware might be contaminated, in order to be included in a scientific experiment. The physician's goal was to determine the risk of infection from a novel heat-treated form of Factor VIII. Luke had never had treatment for his disease, but in order to halt his mouth bleeding, heat-treated Factor VIII was administered. A correspondence between Samuel Machin, Luke's physician, and an additional haemophilia specialist was presented as evidence in the public investigation into the contaminated blood crisis. In a letter to Peter Kernoff at the Royal Free Hospital in London, Dr. Machin described Luke's and the other boys' care and inquired, "I hope they will be suitable for your heat-treated trial." A few months prior, Dr. Kernoff had asked medical professionals in the area to recommend people who would be good candidates for clinical studies. More precisely, he stated, they needed to be previously untreated patients, or PUPs, as they are referred as in the medical field. Additionally, Dr. Machin wrote in Luke's medical file the moniker, virgin haemophiliacs, for them. Luke told the BBC, "I was a test subject in clinical trials that might have killed me. My treatment plan was modified in order for me to participate in research studies. There is no other way to explain it. My mother was never informed that this drug adjustment had caused me to have the deadly hepatitis C virus. To the scientific world, it was an incredible benefit being a virgin haemophiliac," he said. "To be a clean petri dish to understand science through, I was without question a part of that." Luke underwent numerous blood tests as the medical experiment came to an end in the ensuing years. His mother, Sheila O'Shea, was appreciative at the moment the doctors informed her that they were keeping an eye on him. Drs. Kernoff and Machin found that heat treatment had little or no effect in lowering the chance of contracting hepatitis C. Their findings were published in 1987. Currently, Drs. Machin and Kernoff are both deceased. Prior to his demise, Dr. Machin provided testimony to the public investigation, verifying that Luke had been enlisted in Dr. Kernoff's research. He denied doing this without the consent of Luke's mother. This would have been discussed with his mother, although I acknowledge that standards of consent in the 1980s was quite different to what it is now, said Dr. Machin. Mrs. O'Shea, however, informed the investigation that she had absolutely not been informed of the trial. "I would not have thought of doing such a thing with a 3.5-year-old innocent youngster. I never, ever would have permitted my child to be involved in a trial," she continued. Records show that although doctors were aware that Luke had hepatitis C in 1993, they did not inform him of this fact until 1997. A positive test result is noted in one medical record along with the statement, "Have not discussed with patient or family." Luke's medication worked, and he is no longer infected. Laboratory rats. The results of the clinical trials, however, have sparked more serious worries. Professor Emma Cave of Durham University's School of Healthcare Law says, "A trial would be seen as very problematic if those two factors haven't been achieved. A patient should always be given the best possible treatment and they should have given informed consent." These concerns were reinforced by Professor Edward Tuddenham, a physician who treated haemophilia at the Royal Free Hospital in the 1980s. His response, when asked if he believed that ethical standards had been upheld in clinical studies conducted in the 1980s, was a simple, no. According to the BBC's investigation, Drs. Machin and Kernoff belonged to a group of medical professionals who shared similar goals for their research. A sizable group of boys with haemophiliac disease attended a specialized school close to Alton, Hampshire. With an NHS haemophilia unit on site, boys with bleeds may receive prompt medical attention and resume their studies at the school for challenged children. Their physician, the now deceased Dr. Anthony Arenstam, conducted extensive clinical research on his unique cohort of boys. One set of studies looked at the possibility of lowering the child's bleeding frequency by administering 3 or 4 times the amount of factor VIII that would ordinarily be needed. Prophylaxis, the term for this preventive therapy, entailed periodic injections with contaminated factor VIII supplies along with recurrent blood testing. The boys were given the high quantities of contaminated blood products without getting permission from either of their parents. Of the 122 students who attended Trelawney College from 1974 to 1987, 75 had already passed away from hepatitis C and HIV. Gary Webster, who was unintentionally enrolled, said, "They started a trial that required us to have way more of it than we needed, despite knowing the product was riddled with hepatitis." Trelawney's student Addie Goodyear, who attended from 1980 to 1989, continued, "We were treated like lab rats. Throughout the 10 years we attended the school, we were all engaged in a wide range of studies." Another controversial trial used placebo therapy. This meant that some boys received a saline solution instead of factor VIII, as they believed it would avoid bleeding. "When you think you've been given a treatment, this changes your behavior," Gary stated. "In football, you play rougher and run more. After a jab, a hemophiliac experiences a brief period of feeling somewhat indestructible. However, by altering your behavior with a placebo, you are merely endangering your life." He revealed to the BBC that missing shots resulted in consequences at school. "It would have meant their trials would have been flawed, and so we, us kids, were made to toe the line." Dr. Kernoff searched for pups and virgin hemophiliacs, 2 groups of people who would make good study subjects. As a result, the individuals in his studies were increasing younger and younger. His goal was to advance clinical practice through research. A trial concerned a baby who was 4 months old. One of his investigations contrasted factor VIII concentrates with cryoprecipitate, cryo, another blood plasma product, in terms of infectiousness. Cryotherapy was employed to treat mild cases of blood coagulation. Though in smaller quantities and from fewer donors, it did contain the factor VIII protein, which made it less dangerous. Mark Stewart, his brother, and his father were found to have extremely mild forms of von Willebrand's disease, a different kind of blood clotting problem, by Dr. Kernoff while searching for eligible volunteers. They typically received cryotherapy. Instead, Dr. Kernoff gave them all factor VIII concentrates as part of his test. "Until we were given concentrates, it would be once a month you'd have a little nosebleed, and you'd go up and have cryo, and that was that." Hepatitis C was acquired by all 3. Following an illness that affected the liver, Mark's father and brother both passed away from liver cancer. Before it was too late to receive treatment, neither of them was informed that they had the illness. Mark remarked, "Angry is an understatement. You know what's coming because your brother is in the second carriage, your dad is in the front carriage, and you are in the third carriage. It won't deviate from that course. Here's how Hep C functions. You'll get it." A statement issued by Trelawney read, "We await the publication of the infected blood inquiry, which we hope will provide our former pupils with the answers they have been waiting for. On May 20, the investigation into the larger contaminated blood issue will come to an end."